My name is Philip Brenner. I'm a professor in the School of International Service. And on behalf of the U.S. Foreign Policy Program, which is sponsoring this, let me welcome you. This is a terrific opportunity to hear Cuba's new diplomat in charge of Cuban interests in the United States. I say that awkwardly because though he is an ambassador, he'd been ambassador to Austria and Vice Minister of Foreign Relations in Cuba. Cuba and the United States, as you probably know, don't have diplomatic relations. But what we have is a section of the Swiss Embassy in Havana and a section of the Swiss Embassy in Washington that formally takes care of Cuban interests in the United States and U.S. interests in Havana. And those interests sections are housed in the old embassy buildings. And they're sort of like embassies, except that the diplomats aren't treated with the status they deserve. And in effect, Ambassador Cabañas is not the ambassador to the United States, though that's how he functions, and we're very lucky to have him because the opportunity to hear from a Cuban official about unfiltered what is going on in Cuba today, what the intentions of the Cuban government are something I wish that our government would actually be able to hear more of. We don't have a dialogue that's going on, and we're much more fortunate, I'd say, than our own State Department in being able to talk directly to Ambassador Cabañas, who does not, he talks once in a while, but he doesn't get enough of an opportunity to present a Cuban point of view, and certainly not to an American audience. So we welcome you very much, and we're very pleased that you came to visit us. Ambassador Cabañas.
Well, thank you, Professor Phil, and students and all colleagues that we haven't met for many years, a few months. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come. Is basically to talk with you. And the way we figured out how to do it, we will probably introduce for you some elements about what we are doing these days in Cuba. And certainly we'll have the opportunity to answer the question you could raise. I'm honored also, and Werner, who is part of our crew at the embassy. We call it embassy, no matter it is an intersection, and I'm supposed to be a Swiss consul. We are honored to be invited to come here to the Institute. I'm a professor myself at Foreign Affairs Academy. Then I feel at home here with you, and it's nice for us to exchange with students and professors. We can take a few minutes probably to summarize, because it will be no more than that, the main axis or ideas we are trying to implement in Cuba these days. Probably you know that for the last 3 to 4 years, we have been part of a process that we call to update our model. We are introducing basically economic changes and also changes in the way we govern. Probably some of you that have visited Cuba recently understand there is a group of students that just returned from Havana. Well, they know, and they were in contact with several of the Cuban actors who are participating in that process. But we will try to summarize for you, and probably to comment on the last, some of the last news about Cuba, because our National Assembly was just elected, and then you had new faces on the TV, and people that were public officials all their life, but now are coming to the first headlines. Now people are wondering and asking who they represent and where they're coming from. At the end of the year 2009, a document was introduced in order to be discussed all over in our population. For a year almost, we were discussing a blueprint of a program. It was a program for our government that came from the very bottom of our society, and people were discussing all over. At the institutes, schools, factories, neighborhood, and there was finally produced a document that was approved by the Congress of the party and then by the National Assembly that we call currently the economic guidelines. Are a set of policies that we are going through, and we are implementing new decisions, approving new pieces of legislation after those guidelines. In order to understand this process, I believe it's important to know how the whole idea was produced, because it's based on the principle that we can govern through consensus. I mean, in Cuba, we are so small that we don't like to be divided, and as a matter of fact, since we were fighting the Spaniards in the 19th century, José Martí, a national hero, founded just one party in order to get the whole fighters, the whole group of people fighting in Spain together and in unity. And it's the same thing that happened right before the Batista government. I mean, the Cuban people had basically one party, the Orthodox Party, which is the party where Fidel Castro was a member of. And the coup d'etat of Fulgencio Batista stopped the possibility of that large party becoming the head of the government in Cuba in the late 50s. Then, since those experiences, we have been learning how to govern through consensus, and for a basis of that, we produced those debates all over the country, which we finalized with a document that again was approved by the Congress of the party and then the National Assembly. And I would say that all those ideas that finish in 333 guidelines is public. You can read it, and you will see how everything we are deciding these days and implementing, and the laws we are approving in our Congress, National Congress, are related to those main ideas. But as there are too many, we will say that we can mention at least a few main subjects or axes, I would say, because everything is related to that. First, we understand that we have to update our model in a way that is a sustainable and efficient economic model. I mean, every resource or basically resource we will use is because we earn it, and we cannot spend more than what we own. That's an advice for everybody, but we in Cuba, at some point, we had so many credits and we were too updated that we had to use only. We understand that in the future, even these days, we welcome a lot of visitors and delegations that are offering new credits, and we say no, because we will not have the possibility to pay them back in short-term or medium-term period of time. Then, in regards to that, several decisions have been made, and new ideas are implemented in government and in companies and in the entrepreneurial world. The second axis will be the way the state relates to individuals, private individuals, as the government is retiring from handling or managing areas of the natural life that are related just to individuals, and many links, private links that people establish with other people, and then you have a state regulated in the middle, and now the state is giving back from all those areas and leaving just many decisions like selling property, for example, real estate property or any other kind of property that government is just taxing, but it's not being part in the process. The third will be decentralization. I mean, a lot of very important decisions now are taken at the local level, provinces. We have 15 provinces and 169 municipalities. It's different from the way the United States is organized, but more or less what you have as an state, in our case it would be a province, but of course a lot smaller than your state. Every province and every municipality has its own budget, and all the decisions related to that budget are taken by the local government. Then the idea of having the National Assembly or the national government deciding on every single detail at every single municipality is something of the past. Cuba now is governed in a completely different way, and probably I will have the opportunity to mention later who are the people governing at every place. Just as a commercial, 10 out of the 15 provinces we have in Cuba are governed by women these days. And the average age of our governors are in between 45, 48 years old. It's a completely new generation governing and deciding already. A fourth axis will be the regulatory function of the state itself. We have stripped all the ministries out of the entrepreneurial decisions, and then our ministries are basically related to regulatory affairs, and you have no minister these days involved in any decision taking at any factory or any other business in Cuba. Those are the ones who have to respond for that, for those decisions. But again, our ministries have become smaller and only dedicated to regulatory affairs, including our own ministry. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as Professor Brenner said, I had a post as deputy minister. We were 6 deputy ministers at that time. Now there are 3. And in most of our ministries these days, we have only 2. I mean, the minister, the first deputy ministers, and then 2 of them. And the structures are more compact. All the people leaving the state bureaucracy, I would say, are going basically to production and new institutions related to economy and production. A fifth axis will be also related with the economy, is that we are betting more and more in value-added products. Our economy is already a service economy, as 60% of our income comes from tourism, which is a large service. 40%, I mean the rest, is related to health services, which we have established largely in Cuba, but basically abroad. And an important percent is related with biotechnology, and in the near future we are betting on having a large percent related to telecommunications. I mean, informatics in general terms. We are investing heavily in educating people in that sector. We have one university just devoted for that, what we call UCI, University for Informatic Sciences in Havana. And they have several faculties in major provinces. Probably a 6th axis of this process is we have no secrets on that. I mean, everything is debated openly and publicly. Probably the toughest things and the toughest comments on what we are doing have come from the government itself, and no one on top of Raúl Castro has mentioned that the toughest critics on what we are doing. Everything is aired publicly at the local assembly or the provincial assembly or at the national assembly. And if you have the opportunity, at least the one of you who are able to speak or read in Spanish, if you Google everything I'm mentioning here, you will have it in our media, and you will see the way we have discussed these subjects. Those will be, again, the ideas that probably connect with each other all along the guidelines. And I will summarize for you, and if you have any particular interest on that, we could go deeper on that. But I will mention now several of the most important guidelines we are trying to accomplish. One of them has been covered by the media internationally, and it has to do on how many people are now part of non-state property business, what we call medium and small and medium companies or private sector. We calculate that in the last 2 years, close to 500,000 people have moved from the state sector to private business, which are ruled in the same way they are ruled anywhere in the world. They are organized. I mean, the accounting is the same accounting you teach here, and the way you can tax them is the same way they are taxed. Probably not by the same percentage, but it's the same way taxes regulate the economic life all over the world. Then you have, as I said, a smaller government and more people devoted to production directly. I mentioned already the scaling down of the structure in ministries and just devoted to the function of regulating production and services in the country. New ideas are being implemented and related to foreign investment. For some media, Cuba is after foreign investment. It is deeply needed, and we are after any single project that could come and bring money from abroad, which is not exactly true, because we define in our guidelines foreign investment as a complement on what we are doing in Cuba. I mean, the major investment in Cuba comes from our own money, and in some sectors in which the particular project brings technology, market, and money, I mean some capital. For some particular reason, we accept that and we implement that. And our foreign investment law is quite open. Some people believe that most of the new ventures has to remain state. I mean, our state will keep the largest percent in property, which is not right. I mean, we have a variety of them. In some of them it's 50-50, but at least in a few cases, the foreign ownership is 100%. That depends on what the project provides to Cuba and the benefits we think that we can take out of them. As I said before, a lot of subjects related to private property and areas that they have to be ruled by individuals are now managed in a completely different way. I have to say that this particularly has a direct impact on let's say, the migratory rules we just implemented. It is another area in which we have introduced changes, because if you take the migratory rules alone and you say, well, people, they can now travel like any other person in the world, just having a valid passport and a visa and the resources to buy the ticket, you are able to do that. But if on top of that, those people who formerly left Cuba without their properties, because they have to, I mean, the properties remain with the state, and now it's run in a different way, then the people who migrate, they still keep their property in Cuba, any property in Cuba. Then that changed a little bit the meaning for migration. And as a result of that, a lot of people were expecting that after we implemented the new rules, you will have a wave of Cubans leaving the country in January this year. But what happens was exactly the opposite, because some people are missing that among the new regulations, we were opening up the possibility of people for returning back to the country. And then what you will have at the end is a wave in one sense, and then the other, and then the balance. And what you are seeing more and more is people like any other immigrant who wants just to go abroad, make some money, and spend that money back with their own people and their family. I'm glad that I could explain this here now, because in January we had a lot of questions saying, well, how that will work? And I can tell you at the State Department they were waiting for a wave of new Cubans coming. But it will not happen, and again, this came as a result of a process. We have been involved in this for many years, trying to reconnect our communities abroad with our country. We did it. It's normal thing now that any Cubans living abroad visit their families. And even the bilateral situation between Cuba and the United States, we welcome close to 400,000 Cuban Americans living in the States who visit Cuba every year. We have 3 to 4 flights daily, on a daily basis, from Miami and several other airports to Cuba. Then that idea that the Cuban migration in the United States is separated from Cuba or has no contact with the country, or that belongs to the past. The majority of our immigration is here because of economic reasons, and they are completely in favor of reconnecting with their country, having normal exchange with their families and the places of origin. Related with the decision of private business and small and medium-sized business, we have now more opportunities for the cooperative production. And if at the very beginning, people coming from government or from other areas to invest directly in private business, they thought it would be easier to have it privately. Now more and more people are becoming for projects to have cooperative services or productions. It's expanding, and we are also regulating that like in any other country. And as a result of everything, we have to reform our tax code. We have been discussing and adjusting, and I have to say that probably that's a major characteristic of this process. The way we decide on something, if we recognize that there was a mistake, or we adjust immediately. It doesn't take 5 or 10 years to correct that. We go back to the assembly, and then we analyze what we did, what was wrong, and we pass and we approve a new piece of legislation. It's important to understand not only how those guidelines were discussed and approved, but also the way we are implementing them. Because I can tell you, we Cubans are quite good on expressing something and deciding on something, and then to forget about what we decide on. And in this time, I have to say that we are following a comprehensive and serious process, which is being checked every single week. If you read our newspapers, you will see every second week probably a meeting of our government, the Council of Ministers, and several other governmental bodies that follow the way those decisions are being implemented, and how this group of people, a lot of people involved in this, report to the National Assembly and introduce new pieces of legislation. The conundrum on this process, probably the only one we have, is how you convert every single decision on a piece of legislation, and then you discuss and approve it. Because it's not a one-way process. You have to check on everything else you have voted in the past, you approved in the past, and how those decisions contradict what you are approving now. And a decision taken probably regarding the economy affects then environment, or probably the other way around. Everything is interconnected, and again, we have to review and check several times what is being approved. In general terms, I will mention probably as the last major group of ideas considered in those guidelines, a completely new monetary policy, and regarding pricing as well. A problem we had in our economy, and a problem probably all the socialist economies had in the past, is that the prices were too decided and too marked and not related to what was happening in what is called the market. It doesn't mean that everything is related and the only rule is provided by the market, but it has to be considered, supply and demand and any other major concept related to that. Then for several decisions, we have to consider what we have for demand and for supply. And probably it's important to mention another concept. In the past, we subsidized products. Currently, we are subsidizing persons. If you subsidize productions of particular products, that creates consequences in your economy that are the consequences that you don't expect, and you are not looking for them. In our case, we have decided, and it took a lot of time to decide on that, and it's not the same amount of people you have in one particular municipality. It's completely different, the dynamic of the economy in one particular province than the other. But we definitely are betting on subsidizing people, and maybe some people, the ones who they don't have family support, or they are handicapped people, or they have no any other support, then the state has to go there and help them. I told you I wanted to mention probably a few numbers and percentage of the generation who is now governing. They should be somewhere, but the generation who is actually governing Cuba these days, I mean, our National Assembly, the one that was just elected in February, the membership is 612 members of the one house we have. We don't have a bicameral system. Well, 48.86% of them, they are women. They're almost half of our members, I mean, in the National Assembly. I'm afraid even at home, I mean, with my wife and my daughter, because they have too much power, and probably at home we will feel the consequences. 67.26% was renovated. I mean, brand new people as producing legislation. 37.9% of them, they are of what we could say Afro-Cuban origin. I mean, in Cuba we do not govern through majorities and minorities, but still, I mean, it's important to understand the origin of the person. Then consider that origin. Almost 38% of them is what we call in Spanish negros o mestizos. I mean, not. But I can tell you in Cuba it's very difficult to find a white guy. We are so mixed, not only with our African origin, but Chinese origin and other Caribbean people. We are very mixed. But still, those who can demonstrate they are of Afro-Cuban origin, they are 38% of the National Assembly. The average age of all these 612 people is 48 years old, which means that most of them, a large percentage of them, I don't have the figure here, I was just 61.3% were born after the revolution, which means that for them the revolution itself is a historical deed. I mean, they were not alive in January 59. The National Assembly, our National Assembly, does not run for the whole year. I mean, they have two periods of time when they have their hearings, and in the meantime, what we have to produce legislation is the Council of the State, or the State Council, which is a body that has 31 members. 42% of them are women, and women are two of the vice presidents of the Council of the States are women. 38.6% are of Afro origin, I mean, negros and mestizos. The average age is 57 years old. And I mentioned already how many women were in government, I mean, governing our provincial assemblies. And the average age of our governor is 47 years old. Again, most of them born after the revolution. Professor Brenner asked me also, I mean, to combine this with something, salt and pepper, something about foreign policy and bilateral relations with the United States. I will leave that probably for the questions you should have, but I will only mention something that we have been insisting on in the last several years, but basically in the last month. I had the opportunity to accompany my minister to the vote we have every single year against the blockade. I will not mention the details, you probably know, but for 21 years we have been introducing this resolution, and it has been approved. And regrettably, I have to say, it's probably the only subject in which the United States is completely isolated. We are here an Institute of Foreign Affairs, but you can check on that. And this year, that resolution was approved by 188 countries. You don't have any other single subject in the United Nations that received such a large vote in favor. The only countries who has been opposing that consistently has been, of course, the United States and Israel, and a few abstentions that come from basically small island states, countries in the Pacific, Marshall Islands and Palau. Well, at that occasion, my minister insisted once again in several subjects that we do believe, if we cannot foresee in the short term the lifting of the blockade, a complete normalization on bilateral relations, we do believe that being neighbors, we have several subjects that we do have a possibility of negotiating and having cooperation, at least in several subjects. In his speech, he insisted and he listed all of those subjects, basically related to environment, climate change, fighting the drug trafficking, illegal alien, several others. I will just tell you, in the last 4 years, how many times and which subjects we have officially introduced to the State Department, proposals, draft of possible bilateral collaboration agreements, and we insist every time we do have the opportunity with them that on the idea that our two societies will benefit definitely out of that. We do not consider that they are of any single political importance, that you don't have a major constituency here opposing those pieces of cooperation, and hopefully in the future we will pass one of them. In July, in the year 2009, we introduced a draft agreement on migration issues. It was presented again in February 2010. Probably you know that we have agreed 3 times in history, after the revolution, on a migratory agreement. Only after we had migratory crisis. And it seems that there is a regularity in the foreign affairs theory of this country, that you will react in foreign affairs only when you have crisis. We do believe in something completely different. We do believe that you can build the future, and you can build the future bilaterally on a multilateral way. But we believe that in this field we should have a modern bilateral agreement that could regulate migratory affairs between ourselves. In September 2009, we held talks on postal mail held in Havana. They were held in Havana. A similar event is still pending, but it would be held in the United States. For years, we have been discussing about reinstating the postal service. We have a normal and bilateral postal service. No matter how many people travel, they come back and forth, but we haven't been able to establish it still. January the year 2010, a draft cooperative agreement to fight drug trafficking. We have to say that in several occasions the reports of the State Department have mentioned the existence of this proposal. In the year 2012, Senator Dianne Feinstein, chairwoman of the United States Senate Selected Committee on Intelligence and a member of the Judiciary Committee, publicly favored the aforementioned draft agreement. It's something that anyone in the States, no matter if you are a Republican or a Democrat, will support, because if you look to a map, we are just in the southern part of your country, and we are able to stop a lot of operations coming from South America to the States. We have to do it. We have to say that we do it by ourselves, only receiving particular cooperation from the Coast Guard service in specific moments, and basically requested a specific information from us. I have to say also that that service, the Coast Guard service, is knowledgeable about what we are doing in Cuba. They know personally their counterparts in Cuba, and they are eager to cooperate, but the decision is political and it has to be taken. In June 2010, a draft cooperative agreement on environment and natural disaster prevention was delivered, and we haven't heard since then. February 2012, a draft cooperative agreement to fight terrorism. In May 2012, a draft cooperative agreement for the protection of trademarks and patents. And on top of that, we have been, for the last 6 months, we have been in a process of, through a multilateral scenario, we have been discussing in order to implement either a bilateral agreement or multilateral Caribbean agreement to prevent oil spilling. As you know, not to prevent, well, to prevent and to fight the disaster. As you know, we are drilling offshore in Cuba these days with several foreign companies. Other countries in the region are pretending to do the same. Your companies are drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. You are debating if doing or not just in front of Florida. The point is that our two industries, they have to know each other. They have to arrange several things just before the oil is discovered and taken commercially. And then several agencies, U.S. agencies, are being involved in the process, but not a final decision has been made. I mean, in order to pass and to approve such an agreement. I will leave it there. I will take all the questions. If I have the response, I will deliver to you. If not, I will take a note and probably later we will bring the response. Thank you for your attention.
If I could ask the first question about U.S. And Cuban relations, the State Department has said that a major obstacle to improve relations is the case of the USAID subcontractor Alan Gross, who was convicted in Cuba and is serving time in prison. And Cuba feels there is I understand, a parallel in the case of the Cuban Five. Could you help us understand if you think there's a parallel? Why does Cuba keep Alan Gross in prison? Do you think this is a real obstacle to relations?
Okay, do we take several?
Okay, let's take several. Are there any other foreign policy?
Thank you for your presentation, Ambassador. I have two questions, one related with domestic politics and the other one with foreign policy, basically U.S.-Cuban relations. You've been explaining us about the update process of the revolution, but it's basically related with economic policies. I was wondering if there's any new updating on the policies related with, for example, the structure of the political system in Cuba. And in relation with foreign policy, I was wondering how does the Cuban government understand that the embargo has prevailed for so many decades?
Well, we don't understand, but I can comment on that.
Bob?
Mr. Ambassador, can you tell us the areas that we are communicating well with Cuba on, and U.S. the areas that there's some measure of cooperation, why you think that's the case, where you would like to expand it, to what new areas too?
Probably will.
One more on the same.
Yeah, I guess it's foreign and domestic policy, just in terms of the impression of people inside the Cuban government and Raul Castro's decision to step down in 2018.
Great. That should take an extra 45 minutes.
Yes, I will start. Well, I'll try to cover them in the same order. Well, the idea of that.
There's water there, by the way, if you'd like.
You should try. The idea that I mean, I have to be quite frank here, and I have said the same thing at the State Department. The idea that the Alan Gross case is a major obstacle for the bilateral, expanding the relations, is a bad idea for some bureaucrats. Because it is not. It has never been. This is not a national problem in the United States. If you go there, 90.98% of people, you can conduct a poll, they don't know who Alan Gross is. I'm not saying that it's irrelevant. I'm not saying that this is a serious problem for his family. But at some point, someone said that it was a major obstacle. From our side, we haven't said that the blockade itself is a major obstacle to sit and talk. We haven't said the Guantanamo base, that, by the way, it's a Cuban piece of land. It's not a prison to fight terrorism. It's a Cuban piece of land taken by force. We haven't said it's a major obstacle to sit and talk and to debate and to agree on something. The way this is related to the cause of the Cuban Five, and it's been called by the Solidarity movement here, is because at some point the U.S. authorities raised some humanitarian concerns about Alan Gross. It's now pretty well known that he's not, he knew what he was doing in Cuba, and he was going through illegal activities in Cuba. And then he was convicted, and he's in prison. By the way, he's not in prison, he's at a military hospital, considering that he's in his 60s, and he presented a few problems with his health, but nothing relevant. In the case of the Cuban Five, they have been in prison for 15 years, 5 young men. 2 of them, they were graduated for an institute like this one, the Foreign Affairs Academy in Cuba. And the only crime they had was to come to the States in order to gather information about the terrorist groups, the Cuban terrorist group in Miami. And they came right at the very same moment that probably you remember in 1997, the last time bombs were exploding in Havana, in different hotels, and in order to prevent tourism from coming to Cuba. At that time we alerted U.S. authorities several times about what was happening, and they had the opportunity and all the capacity to stop what was happening. And then the only means we had was to send people, and we recognized we did it, to gather information just about what those groups were organizing. At the trial, no one produced evidence that this person were gathering secret information about any U.S. facility, or they were not spying. The media usually talk about them, calling them the Cuban spies. The thing is that you can read the transcript of the trial, and never was demonstrated that they never attended, they never went through or entered any facility in the United States related to the national security of the United States. And one of the pretty things here is that 3 months before they were detained and taken to prison, we shared with the FBI all the information we gathered through them. A group of officials from the FBI, they came to Cuba, and we gathered, the information we gathered, we delivered to them, and we showed them, look, these guys are organizing this, and this, in this address, in this city, in this particular place. These are all the resources they have, and the reaction from the U.S. agencies, I will not say the government itself, was to detain these people, to take them to trial. And you would imagine, if they are fighting Cuban terrorism in Miami, well, the trial was conducted in Miami. And now a lot of evidence has come up about how many journalists, private journalists, were paid by or with official money in order to produce articles and then to impress the audience, even the jury. And new evidence has come up about how the jury was tracked all over in Miami by the same groups these people were fighting. Well, to summarize, The person who are talking about humanitarian concerns about Alan Gross, the only thing we say is that we do have humanitarian concerns about our own people. They have been in prison for 15 years. During that time, they have lost relatives. I mean, some of them, the mother, a daughter, a sister, and in two cases, they have been able to see, not even touch, to see their wife once in 15 years. This gentleman, the contractor, is a nice way of describing that activity. We have a different name for that, but I will not say it now. It has all the opportunities for visits. He's in Havana. I mean, in our case, Gerardo Hernandez is in Victorsville in California. Rene Gonzalez is in Safford in Arizona. Antonio Guerrero is Mariana in Florida. I mean, they are all over the place. Ramon Labañino, I just visited him this weekend. He's in Kentucky, Ashland, Kentucky. And Rene Gonzalez, who left the prison already, he served his 13-year sentence. He's in Miami, allegedly free. But the thing is, he cannot visit us, and we cannot visit them. And he's under supervised freedom. We have asked the meaning of that freedom. He cannot move freely. Our position on that is that if we do have, and we understand we all have, humanitarian concerns about these cases, let's sit and let's discuss about them, and let's fix the six completely different situations. Gerardo Fernandez is serving 2 life sentences for a crime that he didn't commit. I mean, the judge, not even the jury, the judge tried to relate him with the shutting down of the planes in 1996, brought it to the rescue initiative. But the office of the general attorney, I mean the federal attorney in the United States, was unable to produce evidence to support that. And as a matter of fact, they said that they were pulling out that charge because they didn't have the evidence at all. He's serving 2 life sentences because it was a trial that took place in Miami, and the judge just decided to be tough with them, and the same thing with the rest. If someone demonstrate that that's an empty charge, as is called in legal affairs, then this is over. I mean, they have no cause to be there. They could be free tomorrow, and they could return back to Cuba. We haven't said that we are pretending to have an exchange or a swap or anything like that. That, by the way, we had in the past. Because several times in the past, we have had prisoners here and there, and we have exchanged them. I personally don't understand why it's so difficult to have an exchange with Cuba, because the American authorities are discussing with the Taliban to do the same. I mean, to exchange 1 by 5. But in our case, it seems that it's pretty tough for them to have a decision on that. But as we understand some of your domestic politics, we say, well, let's don't have a swap, let's don't have an exchange. But we do believe that we could take unilateral decisions, and at some point we can structure those decisions in a way that everyone is satisfied. Is that sufficient for you? Well, in the case of the political system, the main changes are related to what I said about how we do govern. We do believe that with these changes we have a system that works well for our purposes and our objective. There are completely different concepts and ideas about democracy. Some people believe that they have a good and nice democracy with 2 parties. And others, like I think in Indonesia recently, they have something like 40 parties. It's good for them, that's okay. In other countries, you have no parties at all. In some cases, you have republics, and in other cases, you have monarchies. And well, in our case, because of historical reasons, as I said, I mean, José Martí never pretended to fight the Spaniards with 10 parties. It's just, you say, well, just one party to organize everybody. And I can tell you, this is probably political, but at the same time, cultural. I mean, when you have two Cubans, to agree on something is quite difficult. If on top of that, we have at least two parties, and then when we are discussing and debating, not the substance, but for the power and who will win this, it will be tough. I mean, we have a joke on that. When you have two Cubans, it's too much, and you have to regulate, and you have to nominate someone who is the boss, and then the other one has to obey. But again, I mean, considering our history and the way we produce politics in Cuba, what we did believe and we do believe, and as a result of that those political consultations, we definitely have to leave the national subject for the national government. And in politics, you don't have only national subjects. I mean, you have probably the most important ones. Any mayor will tell you that the most important subject is garbage, and those related with the local affairs. But several important decisions in Cuba were frozen in some way because they had to be taken by the national government. Now we are performing in a different way. And again, as I said, having every single province and municipality with its own budget, where the people, I mean, the local assembly can decide on where to invest and how you will do it, that will have an impact in our future, and present and our future. But in order to be quite frank, in our case, to renovate, to update something politically, doesn't mean that we will split in several parties that they have no relation at all with our history and where do we come from. Regarding why the embargo prevailed, I have to say that for me, this is the biggest economic and political fiasco you have had in foreign policy in the United States. I don't think that anything else could be compared with that. It's a policy that didn't produce any positive result to the United States at all. I mean, every time I have the opportunity to come to a university to have an exchange with a student and professor, I ask, because probably someone discovered a tangible result. I haven't, and I have a lot of people here that I respect a lot, like Professor Leo, many others, and I haven't found one. Economically, you have invested, I mean, the federal agencies have invested a lot of money, but getting nothing in return. And at some point I joke, I mean, at the end of last year I was at CFR probably, and I said, well, if you save all the money invested against Cuba, probably you do not have the fiscal cliff, because it's too much money. It's unbelievable. And still, I mean, you're paying taxes and some of your money is going to projects that are performing badly. Politically, well, those were decisions taken in the 60s when the American government bet on supporting the people that were related with the Batista government, basically that. Those people left to Florida. The American authorities provided open arms to welcome them. All of them, they assume that they will be back in a few months, but they are still waiting for the returning trip, and it was left there. And for some time, being tough against Cuba, of course the embargo had its consequences. I cannot say that it didn't make any impact on Cuba. We can talk about that. But we are there, we survived, even at the time when no one believed that we were able to survive. Because some people ask you about the subsidized oil that Venezuela delivers to Cuba, which is not only to Cuba, it's a regional, Petrocaribe is a regional project, but no one asks you about the subsidized services, health services that Cuba provides to Venezuela. I mean, it's a one-way equation, but it's a two-way equation. But at the time when we had open and intensive relations with the former Soviet Union and the Eastern European bloc, and all of that disappeared overnight. No one bet on Cuba. I mean, those guys, and then the guys from Miami again with the lives to return. We survived. We were able to rebuild our society with all the mistakes. We do not say that we don't have mistakes like any other country. But the thing is that we are there. And the other day at Georgetown University, a lady and students asked me what happened if Cuba didn't have what you call the revolution, I mean, the process. And I said, well, probably we were similar to Haiti these days. That was the future we would have in Cuba without the revolution, with all the mistakes and the accomplishment we have had. At this stage, it's still basically a problem of political will. If at some point American politicians will decide to change the policy, which has failed. I arrived here November the 1st, Halloween midnight. Since the very first moment I was trying to locate, to identify anyone who was able to tell me that the current policy is a successful policy towards Cuba. I haven't found one person arguing that yes, we have accomplished this and we have pressed you to do this. In Cuba, in the first hours of January the 1st, we have been doing what we consider is right. The American government like it or not. We consider that we established a new way of doing foreign affairs. We certainly enjoy that, and we have no plans to move from the Caribbean. And those are basically the reason why we do think that we have opportunities to have normal relationships. I won't say friendly, but at least normal relationships with the United States, because even countries, major countries, or first world countries that have normal relationship with the States, they don't have a friendly relationship with the United States. But there is another consequence of the embargo, that this policy, in regards to Cuba, isolated the United States from Latin America. Because in the 60s, just after the embargo, the United States was able to isolate Cuba. You remember 1963, in Punta del Este conference, OAS conference, well, Cuba was expelled from not expelled from the organization. Our rights were frozen. Well, 50 years after that, we have a new organization, regional organization, which is CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. Cuba is the head of that, the president currently of that organization, and the United States is not a member of that organization, and Canada, by the way, which is OAS without United States and Canada. But the region has changed completely, and for 2015, the State Department has two scenarios: to have a U.S. Latin American summit with Cuba, or they will not have a summit at all. Because for the last summit in Colombia, major governments, the governments for the largest, all governments are equal, but governments for the largest Latin American countries, they have said, we are attending this, but the next one, without Cuba, we are not coming. And that's a message from the left government, government in the left of Latin America, but people on the right as well. But we wouldn't say that President Santos represents the left in Latin America, or President Piñera represents the left in Latin America. Well, Professor Pastor, communicating well is difficult to say in which areas. I would say communicating in order to have results, almost none. Our exchange is too technical about consular affairs, a very detailed request about one particular subject, but we haven't been able bilaterally to unfold something for the medium term or long term future. in which areas we could see that we're going to expand bilateral relations, well, I mentioned briefly several in which we have delivered pieces, a draft of agreements. Our economy is not a large economy, but we do believe that in some areas we could complement each other. I mean, we should regulate bilaterally everything and anything related to travel, because we do have the blockade, and I forgot, not intentionally, but unintentionally, to mention the relationship of that blockade and that policy with the favor of some Cuban Americans in Florida, and how that changed, and how the Cuban Americans are voting these days, but you have some information about that on the media. We should regulate, again, anything related to travel with the blockade and all the licensing and all of that. You have at least 500,000 people moving back and forth every year. I mean, the Cuban Americans and the Americans going on the license, the people-to-people license or the general license or whatever, which means air carriers. Those flights are conducted basically on a charter basis, which is a mess. I mean, anyone traveling from Miami will know that it's a mess. You never know. They call it Vatican flights. You never know when they leave, and only God knows when they arrive. That's a popular joke in Miami. As I said, oil. We are drilling, you are drilling, and we are just in front of each other. We should regulate that. We are trying to do it in communications as well. We don't see why we cannot be agreeing on something which is not only voice, I mean telephone, yes, for voice, telephone for voice, but many other data. You will read a lot about Cuban doesn't believe in the internet, and we are preventing our people. No, the funny thing here is that our communication abroad is through satellites, and we are not allowed to connect to hook with any fiber optics that is all around the Caribbean, because everything and anything is owned by the states and the state companies, and all the major hubs are in New York, in Miami, and just to connect with Europe, you have to go through that web. Then, as long as we are not allowed to go through those fiber optics, and we have to channel our communication through satellites, you will understand we don't have a large possibility to expand that service in Cuba. And there is another sector in which we should expand. I mean, probably not completely trade in any sector, but definitely something related with health and biotechnology. We have invested heavily in biotechnology, and we have produced already several medications and products, bioproducts that they don't have a similar in the world, and they are patented. We have been selling them to several countries, or we have invested jointly in companies with Russian, Chinese, Indian, South Africans, Brazilians, because again, you have the product there, and they have no similar. We have several areas in which we could expand bilateral relations. And then the reaction of about Raúl going out of government. Well, this is related to a decision which is also part of the guidelines, what we call the guidelines, los lineamientos in Spanish, that says that no mayor, I mean the leading post in government, which is, well, the president himself, vice presidents, minister, even the vice minister, and we are trying to do that with directors at government. That depends on which division you are headed. But they will not be in the post for more than 2 terms of 5 years. He covered already his first term, and he's already doing that in his second term. And that will apply for everybody. in a country like yours, I mean, if you had now Abraham Lincoln coming here, or any mayor, and the founding fathers, or the people you consider that are relevant for your history, you will treat that with respect, and you will try to have their wisdom to govern. Well, the same thing happens in Cuba with Fidel. You know that he has been retired from government for several years, and with Raúl, when it happens. And several others. I mean, they are members of what we call the historic generation. But the thing is, it's a problem of life, the way generations renovate each other. And we do believe, I think, in interpreting the idea of the majority of our population, that is a positive development to have as executive young people. You know how that means for high blood pressure and all of that, when you have a lot of pressure to govern, and then you have your wise people and your eldest people just to advise and to be there, to check with you and to benefit from their wisdom. The last news about Díaz-Canel, our second in command now, who is a 52 years old guy. Then if you compare to the average age I mentioned you, he's an old guy from these people. He's not that young. But it's something logical. I mean, this is a guy who had the responsibility since he was very young. He was governor in 2 different provinces in Cuba. He was a minister for higher education. I mean, he has all the expertise to be there. And like him, several others. And my own minister, he's 52, 53 years old, with the same background. I mean, being a youth leader since he was very young, and with different responsibilities, positive results, and well, all over. I mean, in other ministries that probably are not connected to foreign media and people, they don't ask too much about them. It's a generational change. It has to come. And we do believe that it's better to have that change when you have the historical generation still there than just to pass away someone in a particular responsibility. Hopefully I covered all the questions, but there's one more.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for coming today. It's awesome to ask of someone who has present experience. Now, I had 2 questions, and they're not totally related to each other.
Why don't we take one question?
Okay. Okay. So you did mention how I think it's hard to argue for the blockade, but now I think we can all agree that one of the main things that it's done historically is that it forced Cuba in a way to diversify their economy and rely on a lot of players that it may not have relied before, when the Cuban economy was mostly all trading with the U.S. So I'm sure that in the future, whenever the blockade does become part of history and it's not an active thing anymore, how do you actually, because I'm sure Cuba doesn't want to go back to the days where the economy was completely dependent on U.S. trade, so how do you actually see the Cuban economy changing as a result of the blockade coming down? And how do you, I'm sure it'll have positive diplomatic repercussions.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, I wanted to reiterate the gratitude to you for generously sharing your time and your expertise. And this question builds off the last one, and specifically with agriculture and updating the revolution, what that entails for agricultural policy internationally with trade, particularly with the U.S., and domestically with cultivating a resilient, ecologically and economically resilient farming system.
Okay, let's take one more or 2 if they're related. Go ahead.
Sure. With many students now studying in Cuba, the School of International Service has another group going in May. Hundreds of students studying there, learning from Cuban scholars, interacting with the people, conducting public diplomacy in all their daily interactions. Wondering what your thoughts are on this rise and the continuing rise of these students, and what your thoughts might be on this kind of interacting with Cuban and U.S. relations in the future.
You have a related question?
No, it has to do with not performed, so I don't want to say that.
Tom, then,
It's related to migration.
okay.
I'm hopeful about the migration policy because I think it's important to have this sort of an exchange to hopefully overcome a policy that's determined by narrow interest instead of a broader conceptualization of U.S. national interest. On that, I'm curious if Cuban baseball players will be able to leave Cuba and legally play in the U.S. because I think it would be a very powerful symbol to have Cuban stars playing here when I'm not allowed because of my own government to go play baseball in Cuba. I couldn't make it in Cuban leagues, but I would be allowed to try, and I think that would be a powerful symbol.
Okay, why don't we, yeah.
That's it? Okay. Regarding the economy after the blockade, well, that probably will take 50 years ahead view or something. No, first, the end of the blockade, when it happens, it will not mean bad news for some people who bet on Cuba already. I mean, we have several foreign investment. For example, Cherry investment, a Canadian company which has invested heavily on Cuba. We do have agreement with them, signed an agreement, and we will not say, well, hello, Americans, now we forget about the Europeans and many others. I mean, the agreements will be there. They are covered by the national law. I mean, all the documents we have signed, and I think that we will welcome American companies like any other company. What your economy can offer us is probably different in pricing, in the quality of some products, and definitely on some that we could complement each other. But you should interpret, and probably I was not able to deliver this idea for you, that deep processes of updating our model is a show also of a maturity of our project. I mean, you believe it or not, by the media, the information we receive from the media here, but we live in an open society. I mean, we welcome people from all over the world. You are the only ones who have to request a license to attend. And I will relate this with a student exchange later on. And then we know how economy and policy works in Europe and in several places. We know perfectly well what we are pretending, what we need to get for our country, and the bad example that we are not interested in copying them. In the past, even before the revolution, we were known for importing U.S. products and to re-exporting them with a different quality. And then there is a joke about the jazz and the jazz Latino. I mean, we imported jazz and we delivered something else. In the case of Cuba, again, this is not a one-way relation, I mean, between the States and a third world country. In our case, we have something to deliver and to offer, also for your society and your economy. I think the end of the blockade will definitely be a positive signal for our economy. We shouldn't be investing too much, not only in security concerns, that we have a lot of money we have invested not in our economy, but to security, in order to take security and to defend our soil. But we will save a lot of money that because of difference in pricing, as I said, and again the quality of some productions. One of the main concerns of the oil industry in the United States these days is that we perform in the drilling offshore with the state-of-the-art technique, I mean the modern technique. And we say, yes, we agree on that, but it's your fault. I mean, we have to go all over the world checking for the companies who comply with the minimum security risks and regulations, but do business with them. If we do have that opportunity, of course, if tomorrow we have an offer from the Texas company, I wouldn't go to Norway or Indonesia or Malaysia to get a counterpart. But we will not definitely be putting all the eggs on the same basket as we did before. that relates also probably to the question of agriculture, and I failed to mention that sector as one of the areas in which we could complement each other. And it's truth. I mean, the blockade forced us to do many things that we didn't pretend. And among some of them was not to use a lot of chemicals in our agriculture. And now we discovered that we produce by accident something new, which is the organic agriculture. But we never decided on that. The thing is that we didn't have how to do it. We were fighting all the 90s to produce something without any chemical. And then by the end of the 90s, we discovered we were helping environment, and we were welcome at any single international conference about organic production and environmental groups. And yes, I mean, as part of the Senate delegation that visited Cuba in February, we welcome Senator Stavelno, who is the head of the Agriculture Committee. She visited several areas, those projects we have in urban areas, and she discovered that probably we have a system, a small, very modest system of production, organic production in some cities in Cuba that you don't have here in the States, which we did thanks to the blockade, because Fidel Castro said once, probably at some moment we have to build a monument for the blockade, because that forced us to think in a different way. We even say in Cuba these days that we have to wait a little bit before discovering oil, because if we do it now, we will get used to that income and we will not continue being efficient anymore. But still, that will be a positive news. And in agriculture, we should have trade, and we should share the knowledge on that as well. Connected to agriculture and to biotechnology, for example, we have a product in Cuba to fight a particular tick for the cattle that, ticks are a problem all over, but particularly in Texas and people who raise cattle in that area of the country. They discovered by chance that product in Mexico. And we have a group of Texans, we suddenly received in Havana in 2011 several Texans coming and asking for Gavac, which is the name of the product. Gavac is G-A-V-A-C. You can again Google that. And we said, well, how you knew? And he said, well, we have been fighting the ticks in our cattle, and we discovered the product in Mexico. They bought, I don't know how many boxes of the product, they brought it back to the States. They applied it in the cattle, and they discovered that it was effective for 99.96% of the cases. What did they do? Well, immediately to go to the producer and say why we cannot import directly from you, and why we cannot have a shared research in order to produce 0.2, 0.3, 0.5 version of the product, because then I learned that we have several ticks, kind of ticks, in order to fight the different diseases. We do share, among other things, tropical diseases. But in Florida, Louisiana, we do have when you have flu here, we have the same flu, probably the same over there or the other way around. And if you don't have these days cholera in Florida, it's because we stopped cholera in Haiti, not in Cuba, because there were 51 cases at least in Cuba, and then all over people. Well, that will stop tourism, but what no one said is that we fought cholera in Haiti. And again, if you don't have the disease in Florida, don't be thankful, but if you don't have the disease in Florida, with our physicians, we fought that in Haiti. In agriculture, again, several opportunities. A student exchange, we are definitely in favor of that. You are the future. And as long as we have more of your students in Cuba discussing and having a exchange with our people, both of us will be able to build a peaceful future. I'm a result of that. When I was of your age, that happened last century, I was part of one of those exchanges. I remember Johns Hopkins University here at that time. That was just before the Reagan administration that stopped everything. any exchange with Cuba. We support that. We are open to that. We welcome that. We are doing that well, not only with American university, but Mexican university, European university, Canadian university. We definitely support that. And the question about baseball is an interesting one. It's not related to migratory decisions. We do have players in the Mexican league, in the Italian league, and many other leagues that respect in the Japanese league. It's simply leagues that respect the contracts. In the case of United States, you have the official decision about the Cuban Adjustment Act and all those pieces of legislation. But on top of that, regrettably, your association is still. There are a lot of discussions coming and going. People from the major leagues visiting. Now, during the Classic, they try to figure out something. It's still under the current law, but as long as the association here is in a position to respect a contract, which means that a particular player has to play in Cuba for a period of time and then can play here and return, and all the expenses and all the details that have to be recorded. We will have, yes, how to collect the money, because the thing is that you have that many Cuban defectors, because if they don't defect, they cannot collect the money. That's the whole story. It's not a political thing. The only way they can collect their money is if they come and live here. I'll tell you a different story, not related with the sport. The last Cuban workers who were working inside the Guantanamo base, they retired already. Now the Department of Defense, they cannot provide them with the retirement because they are trapped under the blockade legislation. Then those people worked all their life at the Guantanamo base. They were Cuban citizens. Every single day they went through the fence and then returned back. And now they don't have a possibility to collect their retirement. That's it. We have been looking for a Canadian bank. Let's not talk about human rights here. Something completely different. We have been looking for a Canadian bank to collect their money, and they are taxing that much the transaction that they said, don't send me the money because at the end I own something to the bank. Again, it's about the migratory rules. I mean, the question that was raised here. What you would imagine that would happen if a lot of Cuban Americans who live here for a long period of time, they retire and they could collect their retirement back in Cuba. Mm-hmm. They would prefer to do that, like any other migrant. And for the families, it's too expensive to have the elder guy in Florida. They will definitely prefer to have them back in Havana. But still, they cannot, I mean, the Social Security does not cover them in Cuba, and definitely the retirement, they cannot collect it in Cuba.
I wish we had another hour and a half. This was really a terrific session. Your English is wonderful, and we appreciate that you spoke in English.
Thank you for your mic.
And let me offer you just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And come back. You're always welcome here. Thank you very, very much.